The new costume party Charmy is out on global, and let me just say, she is more of a Whales character because you are going to want to max dupe her out if you can. We'll talk about that when we get to the enhancements, but I do just want to say that right off the bat. And even if you don't have her max dupe though, she can be a very good unit if she's run on the correct team. I will say that right now on global, we don't have the most teams to run her like in PvP, but later on as we get more characters, she will become more meta. So keep that in mind. And for that reason, you are going to want to build her. So today we're going to be talking about her skills, what skills you want to upgrade first, what skill cards you want to equip on her, what gear you want to run on her, whether or not you should actually enhance her, which I've kind of already given that away, what talents you want to do on her talent tree, and then of course, what teams is she going to fit well on for both PvE and PvP. So let's start by talking about her LR passive. You get this just for getting her to LR, and when her HP is below 30%, she gets immortality. That immortality is insanely good, especially when you couple it with her skill card, and we'll talk about her skill card here in a minute. As for her skill 1, it is called Pumpkin Launch. It is a single target skill. It inflicts burn on an enemy, guaranteed, dealing continuous damage for 2 turns. If an enemy is under the pumpkin pie effect, inflicts a stun status element on them for 1 turn. This does come from her skill card. Without her skill card, you do not get that stun effect. But if you have her skill card, you have a guaranteed stun on a character as long as they have pumpkin pie on them. And they get that pumpkin pie on them from the ultimate. So it's just absolutely crazy. Her skill 2 here is called Trick or Treat. It is an AoE attack. And if an enemy is under the pumpkin pie effect, applies Halloween firecrackers to them. And that is pretty interesting as well. Halloween firecrackers, what that's going to do is instantly activate the pumpkin pie effect and then remove it. And we'll talk about what the pumpkin pie effect is right now. So the special skill, Charmy Special Suit. Bear with me because this can get a little confusing, but if you pay attention, hopefully I'll be able to explain it all right. So what's going to happen with this ult? Applies the pumpkin pie effect to an enemy. If an enemy under this effect starts their turn, it transfers the effect to a random teammate on their side. This is what it looks like. Literally this icon right here, it'll be above an enemy's head. And as soon as that enemy starts their turn, this icon will move to a different character on the enemy team. Okay, so pretty straightforward for that. Inflicts continuous burn damage on the enemy with the transferred effect for 2 turns. Okay, so in other words, whenever this transfers, it's going to apply a burn to the enemy that lasts for 2 turns. Okay, that's pretty good. And then if an enemy is under the pumpkin pie effect, inflicts continuous burn damage for 2 turns. Okay, so yeah, same thing. I don't know why it's like worded that way. Inflicts continuous burn damage on the enemy with the transferred effect. Like, I don't know why. It's basically the same thing right there. I don't know why it really says it twice. Maybe I'm just misunderstanding it. But yeah, simply put, the pumpkin pie effect is just this little icon right here. It's going to be above their head, and when it's above an enemy's head, they are going to have a burn applied. It will transfer to another enemy. They'll get the burn applied, so on and so forth. And this will move around for 5 turns. So if you read the pumpkin pie effect here, it says, when 5 turns pass after applying this effect, inflicts 600%. 600% is insane of attack and magic attack as damage. Now that might make you think you want to build like a split build, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it because she scales better off of magic attack, and you do have the AoE on her skill 2, and so going magic attack is actually going to make her skill 2 more useful. And I wouldn't, build a split build. That way you're able to get as much damage in as possible over time. Okay, so I would actually go for magic attack. And so it inflicts 600% of attack and magic attack as damage dealt, and then removes the pumpkin pie. Okay, so the pumpkin pie goes away after 5 turns after doing its big massive damage on an enemy. After applying it at the start of every turn, increases damage dealt by pumpkin pie. Okay, and then each side can only have one of this effect. So as you gain stacks or turns, I guess, technically, each turn that goes by, if it gets to 4, it'll do more damage than if it was at 3. If it gets to 3, it'll do more damage than if it was at 2. So if you get to the max turns of 5, that is when you're going to get the 600% of attack and magic attack. If it's less, you will not get as much attack and magic attack. So keep that in mind. You want to let it get to all 5. However, if you need to pop it early, you can use the special skill, and then let's say 2 or 3 turns go by. If you use this skill afterwards, keep this in mind, it will do Halloween firecrackers, instantly activating the pumpkin pie. So be careful about using your skill 2, because you could proc that pumpkin pie early and proc the damage early to where it doesn't do as much damage as you want it to do, right? Okay, so those are her skills right there. We do have the combo skill here, which is just removing barriers, which is just a nice little add-on for a character like this. But in terms of upgrade priority, I would probably go for the special skill first, just because you want to upgrade your attack and magic attack as much as possible so that you can do as much damage as possible with this pumpkin pie effect. And then it's a toss-up, honestly, between skill 2 and skill 1. So skill 2, I would almost recommend doing this first because it is an AoE that can do pretty good damage, but at the same time, you're going to be using skill 1 more, right? Because if you use your special, you don't want to use skill 2 right away and risk popping your pumpkin pie, so you're going to be using skill 1 more often than you use skill 2. And the skill 1 has a guaranteed stun effect, okay? So for that reason, personally, if I were to upgrade these moves, I would probably upgrade my special skill first, then my skill 1, because I feel like I'm going to be using it more, and then my skill 2. Skill 2 does have the AoE, like I said, but I feel like you're going to be holding off on using that because of the pumpkin pie effect. So hopefully that makes sense for you guys. Now, in terms of skill cards, I did say that you wanted to run her skill card. It is the best skill card you can run for her because you get the additional effect of that stun right there. If you don't have her skill card, you won't have the stun, okay? But then you also get, if the attacking target is taking continuous burn damage, which with her they are, there is a 10% chance to grant self 20% of own max HP as HP recovery. If you get this fully duped out, it's a 100% chance to heal herself for 100% of own max HP, which is actually just insane when you take into account that this Charmy has immortality. So she'll get low, like let's say she dies once, she'll just fully recover pretty much and have a whole nother life. It's insanely good on this Charmy. So a character that can do massive amounts of damage and also can't die is what this Charmy becomes essentially when you are able to fully dupe out her skill card. So that's why I kind of said this is more of like a Whales character, because if you can dupe this out, she becomes absolutely nuts. Not to mention what she can do when you fully enhance her, which we'll talk about here in a minute. But there are a couple other options besides this skill card that you could run on Charmy. And so I do have them up here. The first one would be Pride of the Wizard King with Julius. You gain a 10 to 25% increased all attack. The reason you want to run this in particular is because she has the burn, right? Which scales off of attack and magic attack, and same thing with the pumpkin pie. So the more you can increase your, not just your magic attack, but your attack as well, the more damage you're going to do, right? Another one you could run would be Breath of Darkness. Same thing, applies 10 to 20% increase all attack. And another option you could potentially run would be this one with Fauna, and it's the same thing, applies 10 to 20% increase all attack. So ideally, you would be running an increase all attack skill card on yourself. That is going to be the best way to go if you do not have Charmy's skill card. So hopefully that helps you guys out with skill cards. Now let's talk about her gear. What should you be running for gear? This is where it gets a little bit complicated. Once again, you're not going to go for a split build. You are going to go for as much magic attack as you can get. I do have a little bit of attack being added on right here because I don't have the magic attack piece of gear that I need yet, and I'm still running even some URs here on her, and I don't have the best sets that I want, right? So I'm going to explain the sets you want and kind of what you're building towards, but mainly you're building towards magic attack. And then in terms of sets, you definitely want a gold attack set, which is going to increase her attack and magic attack by 7%, which is good for the burn, good for the pumpkin pie, right? And then I would probably go for crit rate like I have here. And once again, I have this piece right here. That's the attack piece. You can get a magic attack form of this, and ideally you run 2 magic attack pieces here and you get an additional 5% crit rate. However, the crit rate is not necessary. You can actually build this Charmy multiple ways. So as opposed to crit rate, other things you could run would be like penetration, and that's originally kind of what I wanted to do. I think penetration is a little bit better for her, but I didn't have enough pieces on the gold set like that I wanted to take off other characters to put on her permanently. But eventually I'll probably switch out that crit rate set to a penetration set. You could also run a crit damage set, like anything that's going to increase your damage you could run on her. So that's pretty much, I would run the gold attack set and then any other set that's going to increase her damage, right? And then last but not least, I would run a mobility set on her. Now notice I do not have a gold mobility set because it doesn't have the gold star. The gold mobility set has a gold star, and the reason you want to run the gold mobility set is because at 2 pieces of it, it grants the wearer a 5% increased speed buff for 2 turns at the start of a wave. The set I have on right now is the regular set, and if I have 2 pieces, if the wearer is afflicted with a status ailment, grants a 20% increased speed buff for 1 turn. That's not nearly as good, right? So we ideally switched out the set I have right here for speed eventually, but I just didn't have enough gold set pieces once again. So to rephrase all that, or to re-say all that, gold mobility set, attack set, penetration set is probably the way to go, but this one's interchangeable between penetration, crit rate, and crit damage right there. So you can run any of those 3. And that's kind of what I would do on this Charmy. Now, in terms of enhancement, should you guys be enhancing her? Well, getting her to level 2 enhancement right here, upon removing the pumpkin pie effect, deals 2 instances of continuous burn damage to all enemies for 2 turns. That's pretty nice. So after you've popped your pumpkin pie, basically nuked one of the characters, the rest of the enemies are now going to be burning for 2 turns. That's solid for getting her to 2 copies, okay? But then if you get her to 5 copies, she gets additional speed, which is always really good for PvP. And then upon removing the pumpkin pie effect, she'll still do that burn damage. And additionally now, at the start of the turn, she will inflict continuous burn damage to a random enemy for 2 turns, guaranteed at the start of every turn. That is really, really good. Okay, so that's kind of why this is like the Whale's character, because you want to fully dupe her out, and you also want to fully dupe out her skill card. But as far as like if you just have enough to get to 2 copies, I do think the 2 copies are worth it. But I would recommend, if you can, go all the way if you're thinking about it. Like, don't hesitate to go all the way to max her out, because she will become more meta as time goes on and we get more units in the game. Right now, I will say though, she is not necessarily meta on global. And as for her talents, on the talent tree, I would probably run magic attack up, right? Because we've been scaling magic attack, and then with that you get crit rate. So that's another reason to run the crit rate gear that I showed you, because you get crit rate right here, you get crit rate from the gear. That's just going to help her do more damage overall. Another option besides these 2, these are the 2 I'll probably stick with, but would be damage dealt and the crit damage. You could run those 2 if you wanted to, just to give her more damage. But once again, I think scaling her magic attack is going to be the most beneficial. Then in terms of defense, I would just do the flat defense plus 20%, and I would then do the defense and crit resist stacking. Those are, you know, pretty standard for defense. We hardly ever use these other defense ones, once in a great while, but these are like the 2 best ones. Extra defense is just always good. And then in terms of support, I would run these 2. These are different from what we normally run, and there is a reason for it. Resolution here grants debuff immunity for 1 turn upon resisting damage successfully. So let's say she gets low from an attack, right? She has immortality, and if she resists any damage, then we don't have to worry about debuffs that potentially slow her down and stuff like that. And so that won't push her turn back, meaning that you will get the chance to attack. Okay, so I think this is pretty good on a character with immortality. That's actually pretty solid. And then also I would give her HP recovery received, because that HP recovery received on top of her skill card that's healing her, if you had it max duped, would be absolutely insane. Even if you don't have her skill card max duped and you just have a copy of it, like, she's still getting some healing from that, and this is just even more healing. You do of course have to having a healer on the team with her would make this a lot more beneficial. Another option you could potentially run would be, you know, the good old classic where you do the either skill 2 cooldown or you do the ultimate cooldown along with damage resist. Okay, ideally I would go these 2, but I would say my second option would probably be the swiftness and the increased damage resist in terms of talents for Charmy. And last but not least, let's talk about teams that she can fit on for PvP and PvE. All right, so if we go here into manage team and we take a look, this is a team that I would potentially run in PvP. I don't know if I'd run it over like an all mono blue team necessarily, to be completely honest, because running an all mono blue team with like Charlotte right here is technically going to be better. However, this team could work pretty well because you got the debuffs from Noelle, you got big damage from Julius, you got really good support from William, and then you have Charmy also doing massive amounts of damage, right? This team could work pretty well in PvP. Another option for PvP that I like, I think this one's just kind of gimmicky. I don't know how well it would work. It would work against certain teams, probably not all of them, but this Uno right here really gives the red team a chance to shine with this silence, right? So running this Uno is like essential, but being able to have the silence there, barrier removal here, barriers of your own, and then big damage, like this team could work out pretty decently in PvP. And then for PvE, this is probably a really good team right here. You have the debuffing of Charlotte, you have the support of Sally, and then you also have the support of William. And buffing her magic attack or attack with either of these characters is just going to allow her to pop off like against bosses and stuff like that. She's going to be absolutely insane. Those pie stacks like are not to be underestimated. If we get a squad boss battle back, I bet you she will be very meta in that. So she is a very, very good PvE character, and I would say I would focus more on using her for PvE as of right now on global, but eventually she will become more PvP meta. Anyways, that is it for the build guide for Charmy. If you guys did enjoy the video, please consider going down there, hitting that like button, hitting that subscribe button, and thank you guys so much for watching. Peace.